Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a great Friday. Thanks for spending a part of it with me. This is weekly Big Man Wee Dram Live. And this week, I am really lucky to be joined with Raj Sabharwal, who is the founder of Glass Revolution, but is also the exclusive U.S. importer of Waterford Distillery, which, if you've seen our film, you know plays a giant role in the film. That kind of catches a lot of people off guard, just how big of a role it plays in the film if they don't know the story ahead of time. So anyway, without further ado, I'm going to welcome Raj, and I hope you'll do the same. Hi, Raj.
Hey, Greg. How are you?
I'm pretty well, thanks. As you can maybe hear, my voice is squeaky. I'm having some allergy issues.
Oh, that's not good.
Yeah. Wow. Wait until I went live so they can kick up on me again.
Well, maybe
yesterday
some whiskey
they
will
went
help.
away. Now they're back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to start taking Jim McEwen's advice, where he's always recommending Octomore. I think cures everything.
Yeah. It does. True.
Well, thanks for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on. It's great.
You know, it's funny. We started doing this back in January, and it's really taken on a life of its own. And it's a lot of fun because this is literally my favorite thing to do: is talk to people I like about whiskey. So I look forward to this every week.
Well, I'm with you there. I whiskey, and I do, as both a spirits educator and owner of a company that imports whiskey and specializes in whiskey. We're just talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's a big part of your day to day, right? I mean, other than the logistics side of it.
Yeah. Don't get me started on that. Go ahead.
Well, speaking of which, that's actually one of the things I wanted to ask. What's it? I mean, I can't imagine. It's got to be a huge challenge launching a new whiskey into a new market in normal times, let alone like this past year. And I know I had a plane ticket booked. I was going to Ireland for last June, and it just obviously the world did not mean for it to happen. Can you talk a little bit about that and what the?
Yeah, it certainly had its challenges. I mean, like you said, in normal times we would have been out in public doing shows, having consumer events. But we launched Waterford in September of last year, so right in the middle of COVID, and that was not to be. So we just relied upon a lot of things like this, Zoom tastings, virtual tastings, with whiskey clubs, with private events, and sending out tasting kits to people, and making up little vials. I think I had to do one that was with people on, so I had to create 60 sets, were like 1 ounce each of 4 different Waterfords. So that's logistically it's kind of crazy, but it's been good. I mean, I think obviously that when something new comes out, the best way to get people to appreciate it is by trying it. They don't understand, and if it's in a bottle, what's it all about? And the whole ethos behind Waterford is compare and contrast, having the different just what makes them different. What's the terroir?
I think you froze for a second there. At least for me, you did. I don't know.
Well, am I still good right now?
Yeah, now we are.
Yeah. So I think I was just saying that it was sending out all these virtual kits and doing virtual tasting events. Yeah.
So I've been lucky enough to be in a few of those with the Waterford, and it's really amazing. I mean, Mark always had the confidence that the story he wanted to tell was going to be in the bottle, that he didn't have to. Eventually, he wouldn't have to convince people to listen to his terroir ideas. That it would just be in the pudding, as it were. And it certainly is. I mean, I've been in the events. Yeah, the first thing I tried them individually, but then the first time I did the 4 of them that we did side by side was at the Southern California Whiskey Club, and it's undeniable. I mean, the whiskeys are different from each other.
Yeah, which really that goes to Mark's point of showing the raw material counts so much. So the quality of the barley makes a difference, especially when you have local barley, which in Waterford's case, it's all Irish barley grown on local farms. Whereas you look at most Scotch production, they're getting barley from anywhere in the world. It's 60% of the barley that's used is imported, and most distillers don't even care where it's from. They just want to get the best yield from there. Where Waterford's all focused on, let's get the best quality we can, even.
I was in an event the other day, and they were talking with Matt Hoffman from Westland Distillery, and he was talking about the barley industry and the industrialization of barley that happened during World War II, and that has never really kind of gone away. And he said he was amazed at when he talked to distributors and brokers of barley, and he'd talk about different varieties, and they had no idea what he was even talking about, let alone where to get it. And I know Mark has kind of staked his entire future on that, and that very idea of, individual fields.
Yeah. Even going back, they've got heritage barley varietals that farmers have been growing, and they're going to start making some whiskey out of those, which will be really interesting. And then the organic and the biodynamic is just about to release later in the fall. That'll be really, really interesting. I think that's the one that Mark says he's looking most forward to, is the biodynamic.
Yeah. 2 years ago, we went to Australia while we were shooting the film, and a friend of ours has a biodynamic. He's making Rome agricole in Australia, the northeastern corner of Australia, which is a big sugarcane region. Mm-hmm. And there were huge industrial fields of sugarcane. And then their biodynamic farm was sort of in the middle of it. And flying the drone over it was amazing, because all of these sort of very corporate industrialized grain fields were just like, they looked like corduroy. And then you get to the sort of biodynamic field, and it looked like it needed a haircut. It's sort of all this, but it was great. And I've had the spirit. I actually have some of the spirit here, and it was amazing. And it takes a real commitment for sure.
Oh, absolutely. On that point, that's what Mark's doing with his Renegade Rum Distillery in Grenada. Different sugarcane varietals, and then from different farms to make the great rums that he's going to be introducing as well.
Do you know when they're planning on releasing any of those? I don't know what the timeline on that is.
Well, I think the white rum, or what the equivalent would be to a Claren from Haiti, that should be available probably September, October.
Wow! Oh, cool. I knew they had started, distilling, because I follow them on social media and stuff, but I didn't know if there was any release timeline. I don't know. I honestly, this isn't a loaded question, because I don't know the answer to this, but I know there's been a lot of teases lately from Waterford about some of the things that are coming up later this year. Are any of those, are you able to add anything to what's been teased? Or I know the cuvee.
The cuvee is the big thing, and that is certainly. So you look at all these single farms that have been released so far, right? We had 3 in the U.S. They've had a variety in Europe and other places. The cuvee is, all of those single farm origins were tiny steps to get to the cuvee. So the cuvee will be a vatting or a marriage of 20 or 30 different farms from the whiskeys that were produced from there. So you'll get all of these micro components and flavor components making that up. That's probably the most exciting that's coming out. I mentioned the biodynamic that will be available later this year as well. That's quite exciting. And then version 1.2 of the organic. So on the labels, when it says 1.1, that means that it's the first distillation from that farm and the first release. And then when you get 1.2, 1.2 will be the first distillation, but the second release. So it'll be the older stuff. And as Mark, what you're drinking right now in the 1.1 versions, that's the youngest Waterford there'll ever be. We're just going to continue to get older, more mature expressions of Waterford coming out.
Do you know? Are they working towards a like age statement releases, or I know that, or more vintage oriented?
I think more vintage oriented, and the further iterations of the cuvee. I think that I'm a believer or a detractor from age statements, because I think age statements was something that until the late 70s, early 80s really didn't exist. It was something that marketing geniuses said, hey, if we put an age statement on it, we can charge more and we can convince people that a 12 or 15-year-old is where it's all at. You got to start there and go up. But there's so many, as you know, there's so many younger whiskeys, 8 years old, 6 years old, 10 years old, that are just outstanding.
Yeah. We're starting to get some comments in. I'd like to share one. I want to point out to people, if people are watching this live in our Facebook group, that Facebook won't allow their name to appear without explicit permission from them. This happens every week. If they watch it, this is weird, but if you watch it on the Facebook page, you can. If you watch it on YouTube, you can. But if you watch it in the Facebook group, there's an expectation of privacy. So I assume this is Ness because it's from France, but it just says Facebook user right now. So yes, the Bano Island. So let's talk about that for a second. How many of the single farm releases were there worldwide? Because I know there's plenty that I haven't even tried, because I've tried 4 or 5. I think I've tried 5.
Yeah, I don't know the exact number, but I'll say they worked with about 70 or 80 different farms to date, but there's 40 that they're constantly doing. So there may have been, I don't think there's quite 40, but I think some around 20 maybe releases.
Okay. I think that I think Mark has a very proud tradition of almost toying with collectors back from the Bruichladdich days, which is sort of releasing more whiskeys than you could possibly keep track of.
Well, that's interesting, because part of it is that, I mean, obviously what we had in the U.S. is the single farm origins, the Dunmore, the Dunbell, and the Rothkopf were U.S. exclusive. We're not released anywhere else. And somebody mentioned the Bano Island. I mean, that was not available in the U.S. It was a European release, and 2 of the recent ones, the Hookhead and the Lakefield, won't be available in the U.S. So it's for somebody who wants to try all of the different expressions of Waterford, to truly compare and contrast, I guess you've got to sort of be a global whiskey trekker and find all of these things around the world.
Yeah, which is kind of fun. I mean, it might be impossible at the end of the day, but it's kind of fun. And is the Gaia being released globally?
Yes. The organic Gaia is part of the Arcadian series, and that was a global release, as will be the biodynamic and the Gaia 1.2. So that's the Gaia 1.1. Yeah.
So can you explain to people what the difference is between the single farms and the Gaia?
Yeah.
And
so
the Arcadian series.
Right. So the single farms, like the Rothkopf, all the barley came from one single farm, and that was the Rothkopf farm, one single harvest. So the barley is grown separately, it's harvested separately, then it's transported to the cathedral where it is allowed to dry separately. So there are separate bins where each of the barley from the different farms get into. And then after drying, it is malted separately, mashed separately, distilled separately, fermented, distilled, and then finally aged separately. So what you're getting is, of all these single farm origins, is a true expression of what came from that particular farm.
And the Arcadian series is, can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so the Arcadian series is out there to do different types. So the organic, and the organic is interesting because there wasn't enough farmers who were growing organic barley. So this actually has 6 different farms on it. You can see the farmers' name. And so anytime you see the Arcadian series, it will be the organic, you'll have the biodynamic, and then we'll start getting the heritage grains, heritage barley.
So, speaking of the code on the back, I saw the code on the back as well. So, I know that I've spoken about that on here because I know Bricolati does something similar to that as well. And, in case anyone doesn't notice, there's codes on the back of all these whiskeys. You can look them up and it will tell you a stunning amount about the whiskey you're drinking.
It will tell you more than you ever thought possible. I mean, you can, it's funny, you can even listen to the sounds of the farm. There's a little soundtrack and a visual that you click on there, and you can immerse yourself in the farm. You meet the farmer, their family, the soil conditions, how much daylight they had, when the barley was planted, when it was harvested, and even all the how it was put into different barrels and the different barrels that were used. So there is a lot of information that is out there. So, when Waterford talks about, you can see on the bottom of the bottles, it says transparency, traceability, and provenance. So that's what they talk about. It's the transparency of everything they're doing and the traceability of it.
I wish I didn't even think to do it ahead of time. I know we have a photo somewhere of it, but they're the yearbooks of the different distillations that were on the shelves even when we were there. You hadn't released any whiskey yet, and it was already this huge collection of. I mean, it even had like the invoices or the bill of lading from the truck, when it would be delivered, and who signed for it and what time it got. It was. It's this is a kind of a line from our film, but it's like Mark had all these ideas. The ideas haven't changed. His ability to execute them have changed. He talked to us about how at Bricolati that he was working in a distillery that existed already, that was built, that had a part of its appeal was its archaic equipment and the sort of way of doing it, but there was no room, there was no resources, there were no financial resources to do some of the things. Whereas he's gone and kind of custom made, reverse engineered the thing he wanted, from the cathedral, like you said, everything. I mean, it's really unlike any distillery I've ever visited, and I've visited a lot at this point.
It absolutely is. I was there March of last year, actually just the week before everything shut down. I left, I came back from Ireland on March 10th. Otherwise I would have been still stuck there probably. But it was, visiting the distillery was just, awe-inspiring. I spent the whole day with Ned, who's the head of distilling, and just had a very immersive tour of everything they were doing, which certainly convinced me to, represent us and be the importer.
I mean, it's funny because I tell people this a lot when we talk. It not only is the product completely unique and really ahead of the curve in so many ways, it's the place itself is, Waterford, like the waterfront in Waterford is very sort of quaint little Irish town. And then there's this sort of gigantic aluminum cube of, I have a photo here. I'm gonna bring it up on the screen for a second in case people haven't seen it. There's this is a piece of art, the public sculpture outside of it on the waterfront, but you can see the distillery back here is not exactly what you think of when you're thinking of Irish distillery, So anyway, now I have to figure out how to get this overlay off. There we go.
Well, as you probably know, Greg, that site was originally Diageo Brewery. That was where the Guinness and Kilkenny syrups were made. It's state of the art. I don't know how many million euros they invested in putting it together, but then they said, oh, we're going to centralize everything at St. James Gate in Dublin. And so this was left, and Mark was lucky enough to come across it and purchase it, and not only have all the old equipment that was there for the brewery operation, but also enough space to be able to build a state-of-the-art distillery. And there's some equipment there that is just mind-boggling, like the hydro extractor, which is this like an accordion. that the distillate goes through and everything gets, squeezed through it. So you're getting everything possible out of it.
When I describe that to people, I always tell them it looks like a gigantic French press on its side. That's just kind of.
Yeah, that would do it. It was just like, I still remember that. I was like, wow, that was just something that, and that's the kind of thing you don't see anywhere else. And the other thing is the fermentation. I mean, they're fermenting, 130, 140 hours.
Yeah, I mean that's got to be nice because there's no pressure. There's no, I mean, I know, but like startup Bricklati days, which tomorrow I believe is the 20th anniversary of them running Spirit for the first time, and like they were just trying to keep the lights on and the machines running, whereas this was like everything can be done right. And we could take every chance we want, and if it doesn't go right, we'll adjust on the fly. And I mean, that's got to be huge vindication for that and a lot of the other stuff that I know recently there was the paper that Mark had commissioned about terroir and whiskey was released. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was a study that was done led by a professor in Oregon State University, and then also in conjunction with the Irish Commission, and I think somebody in the UK too. And for that, I mean, they had all of the new make spirits were sent for analysis. Everything was broken down. You actually have a spectrogram of all of the flavors that come out of these, and it's incredible. There's something like 200 different flavors that are present in every new make that comes off of the stills. And the regular human can't taste all of those. There's so many different minutia that's in there. But that story proved that terroir does exist. And a lot of people, well, what's terroir? And that's still something that is debatable because there's no translatable word in English of exactly what terroir is. Terroir is a French word which can express the soil, the growing conditions, the angle of the land to the sun, whatever else is in there that produces the great grains or grapes or whatever that's being grown. Anybody who's a gardener knows that if you do certain things, you're going to get a better crop that grows up there, a healthier crop. And that's all part of terroir. You mentioned talking to Matt Hoffman the other day at Westland. I mean, he'll go on about terroir. He knows what that's all about and how the different, how the barley's grown and the different barley varietals makes a difference in what you're making.
Yeah. And it seems like, Mark is, it's starting to, it's not starting to pay off. It's starting to, word's getting out more and more, and there's more and more distilleries that are being inspired by that. I think, although I realize some of the big ones, they can't be. I think Mark said to us when we interviewed him, there's not a field on earth big enough to make a single field Johnny Walker. You would need to plant Canada,
Yeah, exactly. It's and that's part of it. I mean, this is something that, Mark, for those folks who are listening today may not know that, the first 20 years of Mark's career was in the wine side, and he came from a wine side. His family, his grandfather imported wine, had a wine shop. Mark and his dad followed in those footsteps. And 25 years ago, Mark had never even had whiskey. And just able to try it. And he's like, wow, what is this all about? But using his knowledge about wine production, especially, he even owned a vineyard in Burgundy. But, I love the illustration he does. He'll put up a label from Chateau Latour, Le Grand Vin, and just talking about the fact that when the winemakers make their wines, they do every grape varietal that they're going to put in the final wine separately. It's all fermented separately. It's aged separately. And then when they want to create the Grand Vin, the big wine, they take all these components and bring it together. And that's what they're doing here at Waterford, because the different single farms will go together to become the cuvee.
Do you know if they're still adding more farms to the mix, as in Ireland?
They've been trying different farms. Like I said, so far I think there's 70 to 80 farms that they've used, but in the core there's about 40. Some of them they haven't gone back to, other ones they continue to use. And it's it's an interesting point, because now you have farms that are contacting Waterford saying, hey, can we be your supplier for barley? And when you go to when you take the Rothcloth to Richard Rothkeys, who's the farmer, and present him with the bottle and say, this came because of what you grew, that is just like inspiring. The look on their faces is just like, wow, I did that.
Yeah, I'm not a farmer, but I had this experience the other day. I was sitting on my dining room table, and a bottle of this was in front of me, and I was looking at this, and I was thinking, it's so not just me. I mean, I'm aware, but the average person doesn't even connect this to being an agricultural product anymore. Not just this whiskey. I mean, any whiskey,
yeah.
or even I think wine. I mean, maybe wine people still get it. Maybe they do. I think because whiskey's more. There's a lot more intervention, to remove it from the sort of agricultural side, but people just don't think of it in those terms. And I think they should. And I think that they are, again, I think starting to, at least at the edge of the, at the sort of more interested drinkers of it.
Absolutely. I mean, if you've ever been to a vineyard or to a barley field, or to, and you go to Oaxaca and go to agave fields and walk through the espadín that's growing there that's going to become a mezcal, it's just it's really inspiring. It's just really wow. So how did somebody figure out to take this product and distill it to make this thing that I'm drinking? Was it accidental? Was it on purpose? Who knows? But there's a lot that goes into it, and there's a lot of fundamentals that people still hold on to, that this is the way it's been done, and this is the way we're going to continue to do it.
Yeah. And it's funny because when we were shooting the film, we shot for a few hours at Balblair Distillery. And at the time, Balblair was still doing vintages on their whiskey instead of age statements. And we talked to them about that and how they were very proud of it. By the time we were done editing the film, they'd scrapped it all together. And they literally said that they were finding it too difficult to educate people. They knew that the way to make it work was to just educate people that you can still figure out the age statement if you want. And it's not hard math. It's not calculus. It's, but I think they just found it, they were trying to grow the brand, and it was just too much of a challenge. And so they gave up on it, which is a shame. But, because there's a few distilleries that still do it, and I think maybe more will moving forward. I think so. So,
and I think you're sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think you're right that people do want to learn and be educated. Funny, I was having this Twitter conversation the other day with somebody about consumers really don't want to know things. And I'm going, of course they do. It's not to the extreme of like Portlandia, where you want to know the heritage of the chicken, the life that's on your plate. But that's not far removed from it. I mean, I think the more transparent you can be and the more authentic you can be, the better consumer. You create people who appreciate what's in the bottle and what's in their glass. Yeah,
absolutely. I'm jealous.
I'm enjoying some of the organic, which I think is quite stellar. So
I love the organic. of the four I've had, it's funny, on multiple different occasions when I've had them, each different time, I think my favorite one is a different one. It's rotating. I think I really like the Rathclaw because I think it's kind of got an earthiness to it more than some of the others. But I like all of them a lot. And I think the Dunmore and the Dunbell they've both at one point or another. But I think most of the time my favorite is the organic.
Yeah, mine too. Yeah, I like the organic. It's very, very robust and rich in flavor. And other than the fact that it's organic barley, that's what we're tasting, and we're enjoying that element of it.
So I have a question. I have a couple questions coming up I'm going to bring up in the chat a second, but I have a question I want to ask you before I forget, because someone asked me the other day and I promised myself I'd ask you. What about the terroir of the wood? Are two different casks from the same forest going to have a different influence, even if they're both the same oak varietal in the same, maybe the different side of a hill in the same forest in Missouri or Kentucky or something?
Well, that's a good point. I mean, you look at like French oak, for example, and there are 3 or 4 plots of land where it always says whether it's Limousin or Tratenoy, and that's where it comes from. And there is a difference in that. But from tree to tree, I don't know. I mean, I think there's probably studies that have been done on that. Certainly, once you create your barrel, the toasting level or the charring level is going to affect it. It's going to, a heavier toast or heavier char is going to open up the wood a little bit more. You're going to get more exposure, more flavor, more color coming out of there. But certainly I think that the choice of barrels, the choice of where that wood comes from makes a difference. And we all know oak, tends to be superior. I mean, you can use pecan wood. I've seen some German producers that are using acacia. There's some other barrels, wood types in Australia that are being used. But ultimately, I think because of the porousness and the flavors that are in oak, that contributes so much to the finished product.
Yeah, I know in Ireland, I know that I recently, a lot of people talk about it, about people have done some chestnut cask, Oloroso Sherry chestnut casks, and I've had it, and it's decidedly different. I'll say that, but people were raving about it. It's just my personal opinion. I didn't love it. It's just very different. There's no denying that, but it just it intrigued me more than I found it delicious.
Yeah, I mean it's you can use different woods, but I mean there's a reason that oak gets used.
Yeah,
predominantly.
So, so again, back to the thing I said earlier that if people are writing in the Facebook group, your name doesn't show up to me, so I don't know who it is, but I'm pretty confident who this person is. I used to live in Ireland. I may have said that to you before, Raj. And one of my good friends there is a barley farmer there in Cork. And in Kinsale, and I believe it's the only barley farmer I know. So he says, you got to get Mark to visit my farm, please. I would love it. I would love nothing more than to know that I've been on a farm that grew this barley, that made this whiskey, that would be amazing. But when I asked you about whether you were adding more farms and stuff, that's I was thinking of him, but I assume that's my friend, Kevin.
Well, they are looking for other farms. I mean, they're looking for consistency. Here's Waterford is the only distillery I know of that has an agronomist on staff. And, Grace, who's the agronomist, works with all these farmers. She visits all the farms, talks to the farmers, understands, what they're growing, how the different growing seasons affecting things. That's fascinating to me.
So that's Kevin Kiley. I'll set you up, Kevin. It's funny because I know at the distillery, there's a woman at the distillery I've spoken to there named Megan Kiley, and I told her that I had a friend named Kevin Kiley, and she said, Kileys are good people. And I said, not in my experience, but maybe she is.
Megan's great. Megan's great. Yeah.
So, and here's another example of someone coming through as Facebook user, what things will you be doing to help expose consumers to this new brand?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, obviously things like this, and and right now we're still doing virtual tastings. So if this person's part of a whiskey club or a whiskey group, reach out to me I'm at Whiskey Raj on Twitter and Instagram. You can always get a hold of me that way, and we're happy to set up something for your group to do it. And then eventually, hopefully, towards probably late summer, early August, or early fall, we'll have opportunities to be in person and doing in-person consumer events. Because I go back to the fact of education is so important. Compare and contrast is what Waterford's all about, and that's the way people are going to learn.
Yeah, and it's fun. I've done a few of these. We'll do another one tomorrow. It's fun to do these Waterford ones side by side, because a lot of times you'll do a sampling from a distillery and it'll be 4 whiskeys that are completely different because the cask program is 100% different. It's a sherry cask or ex-bourbon cask or some kind of dual re-racking or something. But with the Waterford, it's cool because they're sort of like, these are 4 different fields or 3 different fields, and I really enjoy that experience because it requires you to sort of get small and focused on it, as opposed to, it's not like they're different colors, and you know what I mean, they're not.
Yeah, and not only different farms, but it's the same barley varietal that each farm grew. So you're getting exactly the same strain. The same yeast was used to ferment all of these. It was the same fermentation period, same distillation. The interesting thing is they're filling the barrels at full strength that is coming off the stills at. There's no water being added to it before it goes into the barrels. So you're getting a lot more extraction that's happening and more interaction with the wood.
I picture a day in the not too distant future when Mark calls 12 farmers at once and does a countdown live on a phone call and says, start your tractors now.
Well, because of the different growing conditions, Greg, they when it's time to harvest, it's time to harvest. You're not going to force nature, and that's part of this process as well. Is that and the good thing about Ireland is you have a longer growing season than you would in Scotland. You're that much further south. You can plant, maybe a month to 2 months earlier than you would be able to in Scotland or Northern England, and you can harvest later. So you have a very nice long growing period.
And Mark told us specifically the southeast of Ireland, right? Because it's the least rainy bit of Ireland. And more sunshine.
Yeah, it's on the same latitude as like Cambridge or Oxford, so it's fairly south. I mean, you can look up and see Islay from there, but Islay is such a different climatic condition than parts of Ireland are.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of fun. I mean, that's the thing. To me, I'm just a nerd, but it's I mean, at the end of the day, if the whiskey's good, that's all I really care about. But at the same time, it's really fun to sort of, it makes you connected to it in a way that you're not otherwise.
I agree.
Get quiet and pay attention to it, and
right.
I think it's like wine experience,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you have something and you go, how did they make this? Hey, the first time I ever had like a super peated whiskey, and before that, I always drank unpeated whiskeys. It was like, wow, how did this happen? Where did this come from?
Yeah, and it's. I always say that people don't always remember the first whiskey they ever had, but they always remember the first like Lafroig they ever had, because there's always sort of whoa.
Yeah, that was my first peated whiskey. So
me too. I'm pretty sure
40 years ago. Yep.
I think it was like 20 years ago for me on that. I had whiskey long before that, but I was drinking, because I was an exchange student in Glasgow and I was drinking a lot of Speyside whiskeys, and I don't think I came across Lafroig at the time. So one of the I want to talk a little bit about the other stuff that you do. I know that Waterford is only one of the things that you import, and one of the questions to get into that, if you don't mind, is that I'm really curious about is people like you have this sort of range of products, whether it's just whiskey or it'll be other spirits or wine and everything. And I wonder how much of it is that market driven and how much of it is that your taste, like where you're the sort of the curator of that.
Well, it's taste driven. I mean, we Indian single malt to the U.S. market. First one to introduce an English single malt, an Australian single malt, and so forth. So we're focused on authenticity. Making sure that we know the distillery. Most of the distilleries we work with are family operated, family run. They have passion about what they're producing. They put quality ahead of quantity. And so, that's what we've been focused on is in our portfolio, making sure that whatever we have, whether it's a whiskey or a cognac or a gin or rum, it has, provenance, authenticity, some reality about what it is. And then we can convey that to the consumers and to the retailers and everybody else that, hey, this is what it's all about. I've been to the distillery. I know the people who make it, and this is what they're doing. So we do, we still have Amrut single malt, which is India's first single malt export. You've got their bottle of Fusion there, which you're waiting to try after your allergies are gone. And Amrut, 11 years ago, we introduced it in the U.S. market. And, back then it was, just like with Waterford, it's, we had to educate consumers about what it was all about. And it's been great doing that. A tie-in to Waterford is we also import Murray McDavid, which is an independent bottler, which Mark actually started. The Murray McDavid names come from his grandmother's maiden names. And yeah, there's a wee little, which one is that? Is it
This is a 19-year-old Mortlock.
Mortlock, yeah. That's currently what we have a little bit of it left. We're bringing in a whole new line of it, but Murray McDavid is probably one of the larger independent bottlers. We also do Blackadder, which is another independent bottler, and that the reasons we do independent bottlers is it gives us access to Scotch from distilleries that we otherwise would not be able to get because we don't represent, Mortlock, we don't represent it. It's owned by Diageo. It's a big corporation, but by working with an independent bottler, we can get a really unique expression of Mortlock, which we can share with people. And, we do a lot of single barrels too, single barrels of whiskey, single barrels of rum that we release. And those are all part of my passion is finding the barrels and deciding when to bottle them.
So how much of it these days, now you're a very well-known entity in the whiskey industry or in the spirits industry. So how much of that is they find you and how much of it is you still go looking for it?
A bit of both. I mean, today we're probably, we probably get approached 3 or 4 times a week by people wanting to have representation in the U.S. And, everybody wants to come to the U.S., but they don't realize how difficult of a market it is. I have to explain that working in the U.S. is like working with 51, 52 different countries. It's just, we have the federal regulations, which are the easiest part, but then you have every state, which has its own regulations and rules. So, we probably turn down more brands than we bring in. But we do look for things as well. I mean, if there's something happening like with Ireland, there's a lot happening in Ireland. So I'm still looking there. We're looking in Australia. We're always interested in adding an Australian whiskey to our portfolio and different parts of Europe. There's a lot going on in France and Italy and Eastern Europe. So, where we find the right thing, where we find the right philosophical fit as to what we're all about, then we'll make it happen.
Have you tried I don't think you have. You said I think you have it, but you haven't tried it yet. The Cape Byron Australian whiskey.
Yes, I haven't tried it yet.
So, I mean, Jim McEwen says, and I believe him, that's going to be the last whiskey he's ever designed. And, we've been talking to them about doing stuff, but I don't think they haven't even started bottling the whiskey in Australia yet, let alone looking into, international distribution and stuff,
Right.
But it's interesting. It's interesting to me to see the different changes in strategy that whiskey distilleries have to make in parts of the world that are a lot warmer than the original whiskey countries, than Scotland and Ireland, India and Australia. And, there's the whole sort of maturation process is expedited, but that doesn't just mean you get the same thing quicker. It's a different thing,
It's a different thing. And, Taiwan, India, Australia, even parts of the U.S., you look at, parts of Texas or Wyoming, Kentucky. I mean, it's funny, Ashok, who's the head distiller of Amrut, likes to say that Amrut's the missing link between Scotland and Kentucky. And he says that's because we're making like single malt like they make in Scotland, but it's maturing like it matures in Kentucky. So they lose a lot quicker evaporation. They're losing 10 to 15% a year. But that helps the spirit mature a lot quicker as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting. All these little, it's such a humble drink, 3 ingredients, and yet there's constant little levers and nuances and twists and turns you can kind of bring into the equation and make it.
Absolutely. If it was all homogeneous and every whiskey tasted the same, what would the fun in that be?
Right. Yeah. And then there's still the X factor of just nature itself, that it's out of your control.
Absolutely. And that comes down to from the raw materials right to the maturation. I mean, where the barrel is in the warehouse, what's the warehouse is like, that's all going to be a factor in what comes out of it.
It's funny because you every now and then, every year or so, I'll see a story where some distillery discovered a cask that they forgot they had somewhere in some warehouse, and it's been there since the end of World War II or something, and it always amazes me. Like, how did you lose track of that? I mean, but if it's in the right place, it turned out to be a good thing.
Well, it's funny. A couple of years ago, we brought in Hammerhead from the Czech Republic. That was made during the communist regime. And then when communism fell, the whiskey was forgotten about, because the distillery hadn't always made whiskey. And then when new owners bought it and they were touring through there, the warehouse manager said, well, we have these barrels of whiskey over here. And they're like, what whiskey? So we managed to we brought in a 28-year-old single barrel a couple of years ago. And then last year we brought in a 30-year-old. And that celebrated the 30th anniversary of the Velvet Revolution.
Wow. That's cool. I did not know that. The last travel I did, I've traveled across the U.S. now, but the last travel I did before the pandemic, I was in Germany at this whiskey at the Village. And when we took a tour of a brewery there that's hundreds and hundreds of years old. It's been closed for a while, and not closed. It was all but closed, and it was bought and is being completely revamped and restored to as many medieval qualities as they possibly can. And they took us in this cellar, and the cellar was just a hole dug in the side of this hill. And they said that we kept going deeper and deeper into the cellar, and it got colder and colder and colder. I mean, this was February in Germany to begin with. And then there were these barrels in the back that were basically had all but kind of grown into the wall. And they said that they're still full of liquid and that they decided they were going to open them and find out what's in them. But they didn't want to do it until they were actually getting some kind of chemists and stuff. There were experts coming to be there when they did it. So they didn't compromise what was in it. They were kind of excited. But they said there's a possibility that these were 400 years old. And if they were probably empty. But they felt like they were full of something. And I really wanted to go back. I was like, I want to come back with a camera because I'm a filmmaker and I want to come back and be the person to record this. So then literally the next week, that my flight home from that was the first time I started seeing people wearing masks and stuff.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So they haven't done it yet, I don't think.
Wow. Be like discovering Tutankhamun's tomb or something.
Yeah. Or they open it and like ghosts will come out or something. Yeah. Indiana Jones and the Lost Casket.
There you go. Exactly.
Or beer. Well, Rachel McNeil has joined us and says hello.
Ah.
Rachel was our guest last week, which was really fun. And this has been a crazy week for me. You know, all the stuff with Jim last week was very emotional and very fun and very big and also very challenging technologically and stuff just to make it all work. And
Sure.
But it was a lot of fun. And then my allergies acted up, so I didn't drink whiskey then. I haven't had any whiskey since, but I think that's going to change tomorrow because you and I are doing this thing tomorrow night. And before we wrap up, I did want to tell people that, yes. So tomorrow night, Raj and I are going to talk more with the people on the Facebook group, Whiskey, Bourbon, and Scotch Enthusiasts. They do a monthly roundtable with us where we have different distillers that are featured in the film. We have a live conversation and we're going to taste some whiskeys and talk about whiskeys. And so anyone who's a member of the WBSE or wants to be a member, because you can just go, it's a Facebook group, you just sign up for it. It's a free conversation tomorrow night at 8 East Coast, 5 here on the West Coast. So,
yep, we'll be on there.
You know, one of the other things I never did, I enjoy talking to you and I just forget this stuff, but I wanted to bring it. So the Waterford Distillery website, in case anyone's interested, is waterfordwhiskey.com, it's an amazing website. And if you want to listen, like Raj was saying, if you want to listen to farms, you can go listen to the sounds of each individual farm.
And that's where you'll see the terroir tab, and you can put the code in there from the whiskey and get all that information.
You know, I didn't get around to telling you this, but maybe I've told you this before, but it's pretty funny. We had the day we met Mark, we got to the Waterford Distillery, our crew, and we hadn't even unloaded out of the van. We were still, I don't think we were in the building yet. It was early in the morning. We were standing outside, and Mark pulled up in a car and got out and started immediately telling me this story about Vikings bringing barley down the west coast of Scotland and into Ireland. And you know, he said, I don't want to hear any of this Friar John Core stuff. This is hundreds of years before that. And it was very, very Mark, you know, and it was an amazing story. And it was 100 miles an hour. And it was just this incredible history lesson. And then after like 20 minutes of it, I finally said, you know, we have to get the camera out of the truck. Like I didn't have any of this recorded. This is incredible. And, you know, I didn't want to, I thought it was pointless to get to rewind and get him to start over because that would have never happened anything. But,
yeah, Waterford's an old Viking settlement.
Yeah. And the other thing too is that that's when he told us about. He said that the late great Duncan McGillivray from Bruichladdich is the one who told him that the best barley in the world is grown in Ireland.
Yep.
And
so he followed one thing I wanted to just point out is that, you know, Waterford Irish single malt whiskey, and you'll notice whiskey without the E. And it's important to remember that this is a single malt that just happens to be made in Ireland. So it's not, you know, if you say, oh, I love Irish whiskey, well, you know, this is probably more of an Irish whiskey because it's Irish barley. It's all, you know, all the ingredients are from Ireland. But it is double pot distilled. So it's not your triple distilled and, you know, normal sort of Irish, when you think about Irish whiskey, what you think of.
And there's no green malt in this, right? This is all malted barley, right?
Nope. It's all 100% malted barley. Yeah.
So, well, I think it's a unique product. I mean, that's my take on it. People ask me all the time, you know, is it more like Irish whiskey or Scotch whiskey? It's like, well, the methodology of making it is Scotch style. The ingredients are Irish. At the end of the day, it's its own thing.
Yep, that's right.
I think it's a fantastic thing. And it's one of those whiskeys where I just can't wait to see what's coming next because I've just, you know.
I agree. And I had the privilege of trying some of the things that are coming down the pipe, and I'm really excited about that. So,
well, if anyone else has any questions they want to throw up here quick, they should, because as I do every week, I go way over time. Just because I just enjoy doing this. No one else, my wife won't talk to me about whiskey for this long. You know, I'm looking forward to talking to you again tomorrow, Raj. This will be fun. Tomorrow I'll be drinking one way or another. I'll
good.
I'll put a hose up my nose if I have to tomorrow. I think I'm on the mend. So
good. We'll try that nasal rinse, and you know, you'll be good. So we'll look forward to it. Thanks, Greg. It's been great.
Yeah. No, thank you. Thanks everybody for joining us. See you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye.